my hope. It's someone else's hope. But it's hope in which I played a significant role. It's also my origin story. You all have hope, but this is mine. And it will tell you who I am and how I treat what I have done for the last 40 years. It was 1978, and I arrived in Boston circuitously. Helen and I were not yet married, and we were not actually really committed to each other at that point. So Helen had gotten a job, and she knew she was leaving at the end of summer to go to the Ohio State University, and I had to find work if I wanted to stay in Boston. And I certainly wanted to stay in Boston. I had no desire to go to Columbus. I thought I had been graduated from UC Berkeley, and I had been working for a couple of years as a paralegal for the finest firm in the San Francisco area, Mierse, which we affectionately know as MoFo, and all the connotations. I said, this is easy. I'll merely go and find a job with another law firm. And so I called, and I spoke to the receptionist, asked to whom should I send my resume. And when she stopped laughing, she said, this is Boston. All our lawyers are from Harvard. And if we need someone to do paralegal work, we hire a lawyer from Suffolk. We closed down that meeting. That meant it was time to go to the employment agency. There was a job, mattress stuffing. 5 years experience and furniture stuffing didn't count. I knew things were going to be bad. So finally I headed over to Cambridge, to Harvard University. And in the employment office was the job of my dreams. Entry-level position at the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnography. I was a double major at Berkeley, and I really saw myself as an anthropologist, not as an art historian. It had only been a friend of mine who had said, when I had finished most of the anthropology, why don't you do art history? Otherwise you would sort of be floundering for the remainder of your time. And it was a smart idea. So I had done art history, and I thought it was fine, but I had even chosen to graduate with the anthropologist and not with the art historian. That was where I saw myself. That was the perfect job. But my mother had taught me well, you never put all your eggs in one basket. The second backup job. Ability to type 35 words a minute into a file. I certainly could do that, and so I sent resumes to both. About a week later, I got a call. The voice was an excellent English presentation, but with a definite accent. Could I come to the Bush Reisinger Museum to interview for the job of typing and filing? I had nothing better to do, so off I went. The Bush Reisinger is the German, or was, it no longer is, but was the German collection of the Harvard Museum. And I thought, fine, it'd be lovely to work here. And so I walked in the Bush Reisinger, and there were the museum offices. But I wasn't on the first floor. The second floor, those were the visiting professors, so I wasn't there. I was up on the third floor, in the attic in July in Cambridge, with no air conditioning. It was miserable, and that's where I found myself. I was ushered into the office, George M.A. Huntsman. The office was filled from floor to ceiling, 2 levels of books. Many of them askew, and lots of them on top. Papers coming out of the bookshelves, and piles of books next to the desk. Sounds like an office. Behind a cluttered desk sat a man who looked so very old. He was younger than I am now, but that's beside the point. But he dominated the room. He wasn't big, but he had a sense of presence. He occupied the space. And his face was heavily creased. He was the face of a Picaro's bust. He was formal, very formal. He didn't welcome me with warmth, he welcomed me with formality. And he sat me down, and he said, I'm interviewing you because you applied for the job. And I feel obligated to interview anyone who has applied for the job. But you see, they left something off the card. I really wanted someone who was a postdoc in classics or art history. And you are clearly not that. And I said, no, I wasn't. But yet, he took the time to talk to me. He told me that he was the co-director of the Sardis expedition, which is a site on the west coast of Turkey, about 60 kilometers inland. It's a site that he and the co-director from Cornell had been excavating since about 1958. And in the mid-1960s, they had been among the first recipients of a large NEH grant. They had received about $100,000. And now, in 1978, it was time to write the report. A very long report that would explain how the money had been spent and explain everything that had been achieved as a result. He needed an assistant. He needed an assistant to find and check facts. He needed an assistant to go through the various monographs that had already been published to extract what was necessary. He needed an assistant who simply understood this material and knew how to put it together and maintain the files and check the bibliography. An assistant that I clearly was not, but it was nice of me to come, and he kept me for an hour. And then I said goodbye, and he said goodbye, and I said, or did, what I tell my students who are going to do this process to do. You must have a way to reward yourself for having gone through a bad interview. You must have something that will not in any way cost you too much. You must have something that will not damage your health. But you must reward yourself for having done it. So for me, that was a 25-cent ride on the swan boats. Tells you how old this story is. And then I was flying Ricky at Brigham's, 75 cents. Brigham's is gone. I have no idea if anyone makes a lime Ricky because I certainly can't find it. And the swan boats haven't been a quarter since God knows when. But that was what I did. And then I went back to Charleston, which is where, or Charlestown, which is where Helen and I were housing. About a week later, I got a note from Huntsman, thanking me for coming in, telling me again I wasn't suitable for the job, and wishing me the best in my search. Thank my mother, who taught me you never let something like that lie, so I wrote back. And I said, thank you for the interview. I understand why I don't have the job, and I wish you all the best in your search for the proper candidate. And a week later came another call. Could I come back for a second? So sure, why not? I like lime rickies and I do like stuff. For a half an hour I listened to why I wasn't suitable for the job. And then came the question. You can't learn this, can you? And I said, all I can do is try. I don't know why he hired me. Perhaps there was no other suitable candidate. Perhaps no one else would work for whatever it was I was being paid. I don't know. He hired me. And over the next 2 years, he gave me the room to grow. He gave me the chance to learn everything I had never learned before. I never told him that the 2 courses I most hated in art history were the ancient courses. And so I did. He didn't teach me, he guided me. He slowly showed me how to do things. At the end of the 2 years, my contract, because I was being paid by a grant, was coming to an end. He called me into the office and he said, you know, I would never spend this much time writing a report. And my God, it was 1,000 pages at that point. No, no, no. This will be trimmed down and published. And he said, you're going to join me. We're going to go have lunch with the Harvard editor for the Sardis series. And so I did. I didn't speak at the lunch at all. I listened. I learned a great deal about how to negotiate a contract for a book, even down to the cover of the, or the color of the cover. Red, not purple, because all the purple were monographs, and this was not a monograph. All of that. And we walked back to the Bush Reisinger Museum, and before I went back to work, he called me into his office one more time. And he said, you know, now that this has been settled, the book will be published. You have two choices. You can be the subject of a very nice paragraph that I will write about all the help you have given me over the time you've been here. And that will appear in the acknowledgement page. No one reads the acknowledgement. Or you can do what I would suggest you do. You can be the co-author. Yes. Wow is right. I knew it was generous when he did it. I was not to understand just how generous until I was to be involved with colleagues in the humanities and realized how rarely anyone would offer up co-authorship to someone who one didn't know that was even in the cards. You know, it was an act of generosity that I took a long time to fully appreciate. So, I had to make a decision. I had to decide, now that my contract was ending, was I going to continue in the field, or was I going to treat this as merely an experience, one of a portfolio of experiences, which are valid and important to all of us, but which one would I choose? I didn't know exactly why, but I sensed that I had been gifted something that required that I take it forward. Something that said I have to go the next step. The only way to do that was to go back to graduate school and to actually take on the task of becoming what I had never expected to become, a professional art historian with a field in classical studies. Hoffman never directed me as to where to go. He supported me. I chose. And I went back. So I don't know whether Hoffman had hope invested in me. Actually, that's not quite true. I actually do know something. The first job I had as I was finishing up my dissertation was at the College of the Holy Cross in the art department. And the chair of the art department called me aside not long after I began, and she said, you know, the letter that Hoffman wrote in support of you was an interesting letter. It contained within it the notion that somehow you were part of the next generation. Hope. But hope for what? When I shave in the morning, I often see my father's face. It's not terribly unusual when I reach this age. I think it's a common feature in men. When I teach, I often hear Hoffman. I don't channel him, and I was never in a Dr. Vater relationship with him. I was not an assistant at the end. I was what the Germans called a Mitarbeiter, much more of a colleague. And I had a relationship which was intimate, but different from that which you have with a teacher. You need to know who he was to understand what I think was the hope. So his name was George Maxim Anosov Hansman. He had been born into an important intellectual family in St. Petersburg before the revolution. He had had to flee his whole family. They had fled to Germany. And in Germany, both he and his sister had been trained. His sister was to become a very prominent psychologist. They had been trained in the German university system, he at Jena and later in Berlin. And he had worked with some of the top names of German classical archaeology. But it had turned against him. Everything that he had valued had been destroyed. He had fled in 1935, gotten a second PhD at Johns Hopkins, had worked for the United States Information Service in London, and then had finally gotten employed by Harvard in 1940, so spared either being sent back to Germany before we declared war. And he was frightened because his family was Slavic, certainly, and even though he was a devout Russian Orthodox, there was Jewish blood. It was a very dangerous mix. Some of you in this room, I know, were taught by that group of individuals who fled, that found refuge here. Hope. Hope that the human experience has value. And that the expression of that experience in literature, in music, and in art is meaningful. Hope that there is a way in which the present can engage with the past. Yes, that was the hope. And when do I see it? I see it not when I'm teaching my students how to put together an argument, how to make sure that they structure their ideas in a way that they will be responded to positively. Not trying to get my students to understand the difference between a fact and an interpretation, or how to marshal these in a responsible manner. No, those things I learned from the lawyers at the law firm, I learned from others who taught me. No, that he did not teach me. What he made me see was the humanity behind the object, the human experience, the value of one generation talking to another, to say, we know your pain, we know your joy, we know your sorrow, we too have felt it, and we have given expression to it. And you are invited to be part of the larger human experience. That was what he hoped for. I have no idea whether what I've done has been successful. I have no idea whether he would feel that that hope was well placed. He died really before I even began working. But it's what I've tried to do for the last 40 years. It's what I think teaching is about. So, you've indulged me, my reminiscences. Helen can rest. I'm almost done. So, 3 more things. One more short story, some facts, and then something truly terrifying. Terrifying for me and probably even more so for you. So this story. story has slipped. Where's my story? How could I forget it? I had a student some years ago. Student who had taken me in the first semester in my infamous first year seminar, Why Build That? And it stayed with me all the way through the end when she took a seminar and even wrote a thesis with me. She had had a very rough life. It was a very difficult world she had been part of. And she pulled no punches, and she in no way tried to sugarcoat what she wanted to say. She had come to see me at the end. She was going out, and she wanted to say goodbye. And so we chatted, and as she was leaving, she turned. You know, she said, I really don't understand why students are so afraid of you. You're really just a kindly old man. I took it in the compliment that it was. And it really was bad as an epitaph. A career in teaching, I'll settle for being a kindly old man. So from this kindly old man, please accept my thanks. My thanks for many of you for sharing half my life with me. Only Helen has shared longer. And she's still with it. Thank you for offering me a home where I could flourish. Thank you for offering me a place that I never feared coming on Monday. I never really felt I had to rush away on Friday. Thank you for memories. Memories of rambunctious interview sessions and dinners. For joyous moments that we shared and for profound periods when we had to deal with real problems. So now the terrifying moment. I'm a human. And that means when I look to give form to my emotions, I turn to the work of others. I look to the creation of those who have come before me to help me understand what I'm feeling. When I'm triumphant, it is inevitably the finale of Brooks' Scottish fantasy which will come to my mind. And when I'm very sad and grieving, it'll be the Schubert songs, particularly those set to the Walter Scott poem. When I'm nostalgic or melancholic, I go to Fauré and Ronaldo Hahn. And when I'm joyous, I go to Tosti and to Granados. But today that isn't the case. Today is a bittersweet feeling. It's a feeling of parting. And I know no one who does that better than the Celts. So yes, just a bit of a song, because I am no musician and I cannot sing. That's true. It's a Scottish song, though it's become very popular with Irish groups ever since the Dubliners redid it. You may know it. It's the parting glass. And so I'm only going to do a little bit, if I can. It will not have any style. It will probably be out of tune, but it does come from the heart. But thus it is that I must, no, I've got to get the words. Sorry, I was doing well, and I'm not going to be able to do it without cheating. But since it falls to be my lot that I must rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be with you all. So fill to me the parting glass and gather round as evening falls, and gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be enjoy you too. You all. Better with the bags on.